First of all, I'd like to say hi, I'm Zach. I'm the head of product here at Codices. I was also the first employee at Codices as well. What we do here at Codices is that we aim to make live streaming interactive. So obviously usual kind of media as it's kind of used to be is TV, where you have this one-way system of you watch and it's just streamed to you by the TV. But what we want to do is we want to take it to the next level where when you're sitting at home, you can actually interact with what you're seeing on screen. The easiest way we see this being done is through something like a game show. So if you were to imagine something like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, obviously the one thing everyone does at home is that they shout the answers out at the TV and they play along. And basically what we want to do is take it from just shouting the answers out to actually being able to participate in that game show you're watching online. So today I'll take you through the journey of where we started with just me and another developer and Tim, our CEO, from where we had an initial prototype all the way to now having over 1 million monthly users. So if we look here, let me just quickly see if I can minimize the Zoom thing. That's in the way, never mind. So our main product is QuizKit, which allows Twitch broadcasters to run and host their own live game show. It's been installed on over 161,000 Twitch channels. It's had 19 million unique viewers over that time period. And we currently have over 1 million monthly users as well. This is kind of the main product which I'll be talking about. We've done some other ones as well, but for now, this is the one that I'll be focusing on. With that, I'll show you a quick video of a quiz we did with Digital Extremes to make a Warframe, which had over 300,000 players in it.
Is there supposed to be sound in the video?
Oh, is there no sound? There should be.
I had this problem before as well with the video not playing sound. Can't take what the solution.
It's okay. To be fair, the sound isn't too important. So ignoring the sound part because it's not too important. As you can see there, it's a quiz app where literally on top of the screen you see a quiz app which you can kind of click on, and hundreds of thousands of people can all participate in a quiz at the exact same time simultaneously. So that's where we are sort of now. To go back to the beginning, I'll show you now the video which we first made in order to get our first bit of investment, which is us after developing the quiz app for about 3 weeks. The reason why I like showing this, especially to some people, is because some people tend to have quite a big complex about maybe not wanting to show something incomplete or trying to get the perfect product to show to someone. But as you can see here, this is the most simplest way to do the functionality which we have, and it's quite ugly for what it is. But this is actually how we got our first bit of investment. And to us, the most important thing here, which you'll see in a bit, is that we wanted to make sure that we actually managed to get a live stream on Twitch with the video overlay playing. Because those were the two biggest things at the time, which kind of weren't being done, is can you actually get something overlaid onto a stream which already exists? And more importantly, can you keep all of these experiences kind of working at the same time? I'll kind of just skip through the video here. And more importantly, can you have the host kind of control it? So you'll see here, they press first question, and each of these 3 viewers all kind of sync at the same time. As a heads up as well, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, and I think they'll be passed along to me. I'm happy to answer questions as we go, and we can kind of form the talk as we go if you want to get more technical or just stay more on the kind of business side. So yeah, whenever people ask me about making their first attempts at stuff, I always like to show them this video just because it really highlights just how you really have to kind of focus on the important parts and doing the hard parts first before you move on to, before having to really have any kind of perfected application. Okay, so moving on from that, we had our alpha release. So that last thing we made was made in about 3 weeks just to get our initial bit of money in. Once we had that in, we then really wanted to push in order to release QuizKit into the public. The reason why we moved so fast is because we kind of had like a clear aim we wanted to do with QuizKit. So what we wanted to do, we wanted to put something out there and kind of grow our user base, grow in terms of our team in terms of what we know and how we develop things, as well as our technology that kind of sits behind this, because our final aim is actually to release our own platform. So everything we build up from the beginning was always as a way to then move on to something bigger and move off of Twitch and kind of do our own thing. So with that in mind, we released QuizKit. We got some streamers to use it. Here you have Nim, who's been one of our longest users, and this is what it looked like at the time as well. You know, a bit less ugly than what it was before. And yeah, we had these key things in mind, and with that, we kind of constantly were making changes based on these key things. We went on to do other changes. We basically, at the time, were listening to the feedback of our broadcasters and seeing what worked and what didn't. We had some natural improvements, such as at the time, we only were able to save one game at a time. And obviously, broadcasters were saying they wanted to save multiple games at a time. So we gave them that ability, just making sure we were listening to the community and kind of going back on that. But the main issue which came up, which we're still battling today in some ways, is actually around latency. So this is what the picture should hopefully help to illustrate. Latency, if you don't know, is the amount of time it takes or the amount of seconds there is between you and what you're watching. So for example, in the Zoom call, maybe you have like 1 second of latency. So you'll see my video about 1 second later than when I say it. On Twitch, latency is, and generally in the live streaming market, latency is quite a big problem. People are always trying to get down the latency times, and likewise, people are trying to deal with it quite often. And for us, with our quiz app, we found that obviously with the video, it would come in about 3 seconds later. But for us, our quiz app was instant. You'd see the quiz immediately while the broadcaster was still talking about the last question, sort of thing. So for us, we wanted to create a cohesive experience. And so because of this, we had to kind of battle latency at this point. The simplest way we did it was to just immediately make it so then the quiz app only showed up after the amount of time that your latency is. So if you're 3 seconds, you have 3 seconds of latency, then the quiz app comes up 3 seconds after the broadcaster presses it, basically. But this actually ended up opening quite a big can of worms, which we didn't quite realize before we got into the space, which is that you then have to think about stuff like, you also eventually have to have a cutoff point with latency, because not everyone, you can't wait for the person with 60 seconds while other people are still playing, as well as some other issues around some people on mobile have much worse latency. The reason why this is important is basically, if we'd never really jumped into it this soon, and if we hadn't kind of got our hands dirty with it, we would have never realized these problems. And more importantly, there's kind of these issues which you can kind of highlight very early on are clear battles you're going to have for a while. And being able to solve those issues and identify those issues are quite important. And solving this latency issue early on was actually quite a big help for us.
So if I could interject there, Zach, we've had a couple of questions come in, sure. If you don't mind a little segue.
Yeah, go ahead.
If only we had an app to feed them into you live. So the first question was, is this just on Twitch?
Yeah, so currently, because right now the largest, or at the time, because we started this in 2018, about 2 years ago. So at that time, Twitch was the largest live streaming platform. I think it still is. And because of that, it just seemed like a natural place to go. As well as we had, everyone in the team is more game focused, and they had some systems as well, which allowed us to actually get onto there. So between the kind of these entry points and all these other points, it just made it the easiest place to go, as well as the place with the largest audience, which made the most sense. We always built our systems in order to make it kind of agnostic, so that if we ever needed to move everything, all we needed to do was just kind of move the overlay to something else. And because we have our own backend systems, it worked for us just fine. So we made sure to keep it as uncoupled to Twitch as possible. But just based on the way technologies are and how you get into them, Twitch was the easiest place. If YouTube ever managed to open up, we could potentially go there. We're not really tied to Twitch, other than the fact that it's just the easiest place to be.
That sounds like a smart decision from both a technical and a business point of view.
Yeah.
And speaking of business point of views, someone has asked, where did that initial bit of seed funding that you mentioned earlier on come from?
It was just angel investors. So our CEO, Tim, so that first video I showed you just there was actually shown to someone who's a games industry professional. He came from the games industry, and he met Tim at a game convention where they just got talking. And then obviously you then start doing emails, and then you show them updates. We'd shown him 1 or 2 updates before that point, but that was really the first point where we had something to actually show as a prototype. And at that point, he was like, oh, you were probably talking to him for a while about how we were going to achieve getting on Twitch and all this thing. But then once you actually have something on Twitch, which at the time was incredibly difficult, and having everything kind of in sync working, that was the point where they came in. But yeah, early on, it was just all angel investors.
And you make it sound so easy. And one final question that's come in so far from Josh is, what has been the biggest pain in the arse challenge for you as a team?
As a team, I know the biggest thing we always come up against, which is always just, in terms of pain in the arse. So like I said there, we try to uncouple from Twitch as much as possible. And I'll get onto it in a bit later, but the reason why we do that is because everything that's outside of our control, we don't really have a say in how it works. Like if there's an issue, because issues always come up and it's our fault, that's fine, we can fix it. If there's an issue with the Twitch API or Twitch authentication, then at that point, we just have to throw up our hands and say, oh, well, that's just how Twitch works. So as we kind of developed, we always try to decouple from other APIs, any kind of reliance on anyone else. We try to keep all the technology within ourselves, just because then if we have anyone to blame, we can at least blame ourselves. So yeah, because we're on Twitch, we have some reliance on them. And that tends to be, at this point, just what always ends up annoying us.
Okay, good points. So I'll let you carry on with your new game mode approaches. We have had some more questions come in, but I think you're going to be touching on the next one. So I'll shut up and leave you to it, Zac.
Cool, keep them coming in. Good questions. So at this point, after we developed it a bit further, we were ready to kind of step it up a notch. We heard from the audience quite a bit, because at the time we only had the one game mode, which was knockout, and which basically works in the way that you'd imagine, where if you get the answer right, you carry on, you keep playing. If you get the answer wrong, then you don't get to keep playing until you end up with however many winners at the end. The reason why we did that is because at the time, the industry leader for kind of interactive game shows was HQ Trivia. And our general approach was to try and do what the industry leader is doing to prove that we have the ability to. And then at that point, we can kind of step up above them and kind of improve what they've already made. And what we found is that, especially on Twitch, probably because it's a different audience, the broadcasters were looking to include all of their audience all the time, because for them, it's more about making sure everyone can participate all the time. So at that point, when we were looking at the next steps for QuizKit, we realized we kind of needed a new game mode, which would mean that everyone can keep playing constantly. Not only that, but also realizing the kind of audience we had at this point, we realized that they also quite like to be very competitive. And because of the way Twitch is, where people can either come in, in question 5 or question 1, you just need to make it so then you at least get some satisfaction from answering questions when you know you're not going to be the final winner, or at least maybe even still have some sort of chance to win. So we ended up coming up with a points mode game approach, where depending on how fast you answer is how many points you either win or lose. So in this case, it says about 16,000, which basically means there's 16.5 seconds left. In this case, you would get 16,000 points. If you got the answer wrong, you'd lose 16,000 points. which kind of brings me on to another point, which is kind of like a side point, but something else we found, which maybe is linked to the annoyance part, is if you have enough users, and with Twitch, there's always thousands of them. If you have enough users, then they will just try and break your stuff and they'll try to cheat. So in the case of our games, you'd have people constantly trying to cheat. So they spam click answers in order to try and get the maximum points. So in order to get around that, we just kind of made it worse for them if they did that. And constantly, you know, every couple of months, we always hear about from our broadcasters that they found like a new way that you could possibly cheat. And we always have to end up solving it. So definitely don't trust the users to just be nice. But on that point, something that I definitely say helped for us is very early on, I decided to make it so then if someone is cheating, then I try to make it so then they think they actually successfully cheated, when in actual fact, we're just ignoring them. Because usually at that point, if they feel like they've done what they wanted to do and they get their little satisfaction of like, haha, I cheated on your quiz, then in actual fact, they actually just stop and they don't bother trying to get to the next step. Whereas if you do block them and say, I know what you're doing, then they go, okay, well, what else can I do? So yeah, maybe that's more specific to games, but the idea of if you have enough users, they're going to try and break your stuff is still valid, I'd say. So you definitely have to be careful for that. Right now I've probably been talking all about good points. And our company at this point had been around for a couple of months and everything was going fairly well. So I thought it'd be worth mentioning a couple of the fires which we had to put out in this time as well. One of the first things was our first big client, Jayex. We were going to do a demo with them at one point, and this was in order to get them on board as a client. And we realized at the time that on the day of the demo, one of our users came to us and said, oh, for some reason QuizKit isn't working. Do you know what's up with that? It turns out that one of our developers had changed one of the actual URL of our endpoints, which means that all of our endpoints just basically weren't working. And because of that, it means that our extension wasn't working, which obviously on the day of a demo isn't really what you want. And to make it worse, because of our reliance on Twitch, in order to get a new build out, it takes about 2 days. So even if we had a fix, we wouldn't be able to get it out in time for the demo. So luckily we managed to get some sort of dev, like a development version of the build. I managed to show them that. And then we managed to beg the people we knew at Twitch to upload the new build so our users didn't get too mad. But yeah, and the second fire, which is worth mentioning as well, because they're kind of related, is once we actually got to Christmas and we had that points mode out, our user Nim, who you saw at the beginning there, he did a big New Year's quiz. It was probably, at the time, it was the biggest quiz we were ever going to do. It was about 8,000 and our last biggest was about 2,000. So huge quiz. And at about question 5 or 6, people started to have their quizzes break. It turns out there was some sort of error in which every question, some of the data would be doubled up. And so every question, there'd be more of a chance for it to break. And with 8,000 players as well, just the load just wasn't able to take it and just kind of crumbled. So yeah, dealing with fires on New Year's isn't the best, but nonetheless, the reason why I'm bringing these up is because kind of every startup ends up having their own issues. And if there's one thing I've learned with dealing with these fires, the way I always deal with it is that I first kind of, you have all these emotions rising up first, and obviously you put those second just for now. You focus on just kind of finding out what the issue is first, identifying it. Then once you've identified it, then you can start to work on the solution, and then you can bring your emotions into it, and then you can scream into a pillow. But you definitely want to fix it first. And more importantly as well, these areas can be quite heavy on the people who are involved. At the time, it was just me, Tim, the CEO, and another developer. And both these issues came from the back end, which was more his responsibility. And because you're in such a small team, that pressure really weighs on people quite a bit. And the other developer actually left because of this pressure that was on him. So it's kind of important to remember that not only do you need to kind of support each other to make sure that people don't like crack under the pressure, but also in terms of when you bring people on, at least in a startup, you kind of need to make sure they can handle that pressure, because even if you support each other, it's not going to go away, and being able to deal with it is quite an important thing. You need to be quite hard-skinned. But then also at the end of the day, something we always say to each other whenever there's an error is, it's a quiz app. No one died. No one's lost a leg. And it's okay. We can deal with it. We can come back from it. It's not that bad. We had that bad New Year's thing. That must have been almost 2 years ago now. And, we're doing fine now. So it all works out in the end, as long as you can answer it. Yeah. So back onto good news. Our first client. So like I mentioned there before, we had our first client coming in, which was Jagex. If you don't know who Jagex are, they make a game called RuneScape, which has millions of users, very, very popular. And this was actually off the back of the other developer leaving. So at this point, it was just me and Tim. There's quite a lot of work because we planned it out for 2 developers. And at the time, I didn't really know the back end that well. So it was a very interesting time to try and get through. But in classic startup fashion, you kind of do what you need to do. You kind of scrap something together in order to get it working. And we did manage to get it out. And Jagex are still our clients now. I think we just had a call with them this morning. So we've had a very good relationship with them since. And it's all from the back of this first point. But one thing from this, though, although I say it worked out great, we end up incurring some issues from this, because the kind of startup fashion of just get it done, that idea of if it's working, then that's the main thing that matters. It does bring up issues, because every time you do that, you kind of have this technical debt which builds up. And it's a word that we throw around the office a lot right now, is this technical debt. It did work at the time, but a couple of months later, you'll start getting bugs, and then you have to fix those bugs, and suddenly more things start creeping up. So although this mentality of get it done is really good for startups, it's something which, if I was to talk about it, I'd be very wary of, and at least be aware that if you're going to try and just get something done quick and dirty, that you have to be aware that chances are it's going to creep back up on you. It's almost definitely going to creep back up on you. And that if you keep leaving all of these little issues where you just did quick and easy, then eventually you're going to have a sleeping giant under your whole entire project. And it will come back up eventually. It's come back up on us at this point, and we have to do a pretty big refactor in order to get it to where we want it to be, and to fix these issues that we keep having to go back on. But yeah, nonetheless, they came on board. They're very happy with their quizzes. Jagex seem to love their quizzes, so they're very happy. Off the back of Jagex, since we had some money from them, we have our first client under our belt.
What time does the 6, I think?
Okay, since we had our first client at this point, and off the back of Jagex as well, we managed to get a little bit of investment. We managed to hire some more people. We managed to hire 2 more devs. And this was the first time in Codices that we were looking out to go and hire people. As you guys all know, being from Cornwall, hiring good devs can be quite challenging at times. So one of the things we do in particular is we hit them with a quick programming test, which most of you might know. It's just a FizzBuzz, very simple programming test. We give them about 10 minutes to solve it, and that normally weeds out quite a few of them. And surprisingly, that ends up leaving us with just like 1 or 2 applicants who we can consider, because for us, if they can't solve FizzBuzz, then they're kind of not what we're looking for. And like I mentioned before, we were looking for a very particular type of people as well. I mentioned the pressure thing before, making sure people can handle the pressure. But there's also, because there's so little people, everyone has so much responsibility as well, and they have to take care of so much. and their skills as well have to be kind of ever increasing. We're kind of looking for diamonds in the roughs sort of people, where or like juniors who have great potential, but bigger companies just can't consider because their lack of experience. Whereas for us, those people are perfect because they're ready to kind of really improve and really prove themselves with what they can do, because their skills are above what they technically are considered. There is other issues in this area as well, because we hired one person who again would have been great in a larger company because his skills were there, but he took so much time to give help to and kind of take him through the steps and help him through his work, that because time is so important in a startup and with our company, we just couldn't really afford to have someone who takes up two people's times. So that was probably one of the early on hard decisions between people that we had to do, because yeah, like I said, in terms of his skills, he would have been great in a bigger company, but for us, we didn't have the resources in order to keep him there. And it's lucky that we noticed it earlier on rather than later, because we managed to kind of move on from that quite well as well. Also off the back of this, we managed to hire one of the senior industry professionals who we kind of had attached to our company for a while. And he had quite a high cost, but the idea being that he would bring in more business for us, and therefore that kind of offset it. He was great to work with, but one of the problems we found is that because his cost was just so high, it just wasn't really worth it. And the point of it as well was to kind of legitimize the company as well. But unfortunately, it just, the kind of input to outputs just couldn't work out. And we realized it would kind of be a sacrifice the company or sacrifice the person we're working with. So it's kind of, I guess this is kind of a two-part of hiring and the ugly side of hiring, where you have to let people go. But if we had known both of these things sooner, it would have definitely helped out a lot if we had known to not spend too much on just one person, and also make sure you find the right kind of person to go with.
So I'm going to interject here, Zach. We're running out of time, and there's a couple of questions I want to throw at you before we wrap up. And I think quick answer questions. So the first one is, are you working with any other colleges to make sure that they're outputting the right kind of talent that you're looking for?
No, I think at one point we were trying to reach out to get a possible apprentice, okay. but that didn't quite go through. I mean, we'd probably be interested in doing something like that, but at the moment we're not currently. If that question is coming from someone who's interested, then feel free to contact us. My email is just zac@codices.io. I can bring that up in a bit as well.
And we can put that email in the follow-up message we'll send out to all the attendees so that they can make that connection if they want. And we've had a question come in about growing the user base.
Yeah.
Was there any specific tactic that you used to grow it in the early days? And how long did it take you to reach 1 million active users?
I'm not entirely sure about how long it took us, but we've been going for about 2 years, and I think we just recently probably passed it. So the early on tactics were to reach out to broadcasters who we kind of knew the type of broadcast we wanted, because there's a growing market on Twitch for people who just kind of, like here, just talk to the camera like this, and it's called just chatting, where they just kind of talk to a camera and they kind of just talk to their viewers. And there's people who kind of try and simulate game shows and that type of thing. So we knew the type of broadcaster we wanted, so we managed to approach these people. And more importantly, when it comes to broadcasters, they tend to speak with each other as well. So if you get one broadcast, you can kind of get them to talk to each other as well. And these broadcasters also watch each other. So it kind of has a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy type of marketing, where if you get one big user to use it, other users watch them, then they use it as well. And likewise, when Jagged used it, you'd get a bunch of RuneScape players then use it as well. In order to get to 1 million viewers, 1 million users as well, the clients definitely helped in that case as well. That Warframe, because we did at the beginning with the 3,000 users, is a great boost to those numbers as well. So yeah, making sure to get big broadcasters and big users is the best thing.
Okay, so center it around those key clients and the rest will come. I like that. I like that. And one final question from James. How did you set your price point? It was a new product to the market, I guess.
So QuizKit is actually, in case it's not clear, QuizKit is a free product for broadcasters. Anyone can go around and download it. The reason why we did that is so that we can actually like prove out that it works. So we have all these broadcasters constantly using it. We make sure that it's working. We kind of improve our systems based on that. And the way we make our money is we go to clients and say, like in the image you saw before with RuneScape, we then reskin it and put it out there for them using that. And they can also then, we also put in some winners pop-ups as well, so they can then give prizes to their users based on the quiz. The way we price that out is then just based on how many dev days it takes basically, and then get some profit out of it. But yeah, we use QuizKit as a free product in order to generate that. And we just recently also put in some digital purchases as well, so people can pay to have their score pop up on the screen as the quiz goes along. So we're trying out some new monetization strategies as well.
That's exciting. So I think we'll have to wrap up this talk here so we can move on to the other stuff. So can I get everyone to give Zac a huge round of applause, please? This is where I realise everyone is still muted and it's just me.